The 74-Year Leap, The Mystery of Rudolph Fentz. In June 1950, the neon pulse of Times Square was a symphony of modern life. Yellow cabs honked, and jazz drifted from basement clubs. But amidst the rush of the mid-century crowd, a man appeared who seemed carved from a different era. He stood near the curb, his eyes wide with a terror that no ordinary city noise could justify. He looked like a ghost who had accidentally stepped into the light of the living. The man panicked. The screech of brakes and the roar of engines were sounds he didn't seem to recognize. He bolted into the middle of the street, dodging a sedan, only to stumble into the path of a speeding taxi. In an instant, the strange figure was struck down. The crowd gasped as the man in the antique clothes lay still on the asphalt, the life fleeing from him before the police could even arrive. Detective Hubert Rehm was assigned to the case. He was a man who believed in ledgers, fingerprints, and hard facts. But when he stood in the cold air of the morgue, looking at the deceased stranger, his logical mind felt a chill. The man looked to be about 30 years old, yet everything about him suggested he had stepped out of a history book rather than a 1950s apartment. Rehm began the grim task of cataloging the man's possessions. He pulled items from the heavy wool pockets that shouldn't have existed in 1950. There was a copper token for a beer at a saloon long since demolished, and about $70 in banknotes so old they felt brittle. Not a single bill was dated later than 1876. Among the artifacts was a business card for a Rudolph Fentz at an address on Fifth Avenue and a letter addressed to the same name. The letter was postmarked Philadelphia, June 1876. There was no Social Security card, no driver's license, and no modern identification. To the law, this man did not exist in the 20th century. He was a living fossil, perfectly preserved until the moment of his death. Detective Rehm spent weeks scouring the city's records. He checked the missing persons files for 1950, 1949, and 1940, finding nothing. He visited the Fifth Avenue address on the business card, only to find a modern office building where no one had ever heard of a Fentz. Rehm sat in his office, the smoke from his cigarette curling into the air like a question mark. Just as the trail was turning cold, Rehm found a lead in a 1939 telephone directory. There was a listing for a Rudolph Fentz Jr. He tracked down the address and spoke to a woman who identified herself as the widow of Rudolph Fentz Jr. She remembered her late husband speaking of a great mystery in their family, a mystery that had started nearly 80 years ago. The widow, Mrs. Helga Fentz, told Rehm a story that defied common sense. She said that her father-in-law, Rudolph Fentz Sr., had vanished one evening in 1876. He had stepped out for a walk after dinner to clear his head and never returned. The family had searched for years, but the man had simply evaporated into the night air. Rehm hurried to the police archives, digging through the crumbling yellowed ledgers of the 19th century. There, in the missing persons reports for 1876, he found it. The description matched perfectly. Rudolph Fentz, age 29, wearing a frock coat, silk hat, and possessing mutton chop sideburns. He had disappeared without a trace, exactly 74 years before he appeared in Times Square. Rehm closed the case, though he never filed his final theory officially. Some called it an urban legend, others a time slip, a rare tear in the fabric of reality that had swallowed a man in 1876 and spat him out in 1950. Rudolph Fentz had taken a walk that lasted 7 decades, only to find that the future was a place where he no longer belonged.